I want to welcome you to the most remarkable journey you will ever take. We have long wondered about the mysteries behind the resurrection of the dead, or the transformation of human to divine. We have asked ourselves these questions. Why am I human? Where are we going as a human race? Why did God create us? In these next 26 weeks, we're going to learn the answers to these questions. We're also going to learn about the powers that lie within us, that creativity that enables us to prophesy, to heal, and to discern. Our sailing vessel that will take us from earth to the heavens is known and called the Nautilus. If you remember, the sea creature is one which always closes and seals off its chambers as it outgrows it and builds a new one. And we must do the same thing, for we must cease being what we are in order to become something different. And like the Nautilus, we must leave behind our old ideas and concepts. So please join me on this very wondrous journey. I'm your hostess, Elizabeth MacDonald Burrows. Welcome aboard the Nautilus, which will take us from earth to heaven. You may think that's strange to have an old three-masted sailing vessel to represent that mysterious and wondrous journey that each of us will make. But it really all started a number of years ago. I was listening to a CD that had been composed by Tony O'Connor, an Australian composer. It was called The Mariner, and it had gone platinum. And while I was listening to it, I was sitting on the bed, and I was, of course, kind of cross-legged. And all of a sudden, my room transfigured into the deck of an old sailing ship. And this can happen once the Spirit has come to dwell with us. He can transfigure those things around us into whatever experience He wants us to have. And so here I was aboard this ancient sailing vessel, and we were sailing off to some very special land, the land we go to when we are without embodiment. And as a result of this, I wrote a poem called The Silent Mariner, and that won the National Longfellow competition. But I always think in terms of the silent mariner, that silent one that lives with each of us, that part of God that has been given to each of us individually, that guides us, leads us, and I'm certainly not going to say pampers us, but teaches us our lessons so that we can enter into a world of peace that He has planned for us. So as we aboard this Nautilus, we're going to take a look at some of the things that we're going to cover in these next 26 weeks, I believe. First, we're going to take a look at creation, because Neil Armstrong did say that he who could not understand the nature of the universe could not understand his destiny. And this took me back over 2,000 years ago to a statement that Jesus made in the Gospel of Thomas, when His disciples came and asked Him when the end would be. And He said, "Do you know yet the beginning? Because if you know the beginning, you know the end." And to me, that spoke the same words of Neil Armstrong. We must understand the beginning of the universe if we are to understand our destiny, if we're to understand why we're human and where we're going as a human race. So in the process of this, we will be taking a look at creation, the origin of creation. Many people have felt that creationism and, of course, evolution cannot go together, because Darwin's theory of evolution through the law of natural selection always has signified that which is outside, meaning outer to inner. Creationism, on the other hand, defines that which is inner that goes outer. And in that, we're going to learn that our inner is that which draws to us all the material necessary for an outside form, depending on our current degree of progression, that we cannot separate evolution and creation any more than we can tear the skin from our body. So we're going to look at creation, and as we go through creation, we'll understand more about what constitutes the makeup of ourself. And we're going to approach that subject of creation versus evolution. And as if that isn't enough, we're going to approach something which is very difficult for the Christian to understand, to comprehend, and more to accept. And that is evolution versus reincarnation. It is a dreaded word in the Christian language because if we, for instance, believe that there was successive lives which enabled us to climb the ladder of the stars, then we would have to change our concepts of how we approach Christianity. It is very easy for us to make the statement, I've been saved and we have nothing else to worry about. But of course, what I puzzled about so many years ago was the fact that would I be satisfied to sit at the feet of Jesus and to listen to him for billions and billions of years? To me, I thought there should be more to life than that. And as we proceed, we are going to see that yes, indeed there is. It was New Testament which led me on the beginning of my own journey. I was in Matthew when I read the two scriptures that Jesus wrote or said, and that was to love God with all your heart and all your soul, and to love each other. And it's always been my concept that perhaps we could even throw the Bible away and just abide by those two primordial rules that Jesus left for us, and we would have a better world. So in my search for God, I put him first, as Jesus had told me. And I suppose at that time I kind of was like everyone else. I probably thought that God was some deity that sits up there in the sky, and that somehow when I pray to him, he knew exactly what I was praying for, and that he would answer me. But as a deity, I did not understand the magnitude of God, who is 150 billion known galaxies. And so I left no stone unturned. I wooed him, I courted him. And when we talk about wooing and courting, I'm not talking about the romance as we think of wooing or courting someone that we might be in love with, but more so that I wooed and courted as a disciple to God. I chose him as my master teacher. And I can remember some of the things I used to do. I'd write him letters when the sun was high in the sky and it was warm, and I would thank him for shining in the sun. I would call upon him or give him gifts by creating them in the eye of my mind. In other words, we don't think about thought being so wondrous that we can actually create a thought form and to send it into the mind of God, into the consciousness of God, or into the consciousness of Jesus, so that we can give gifts of the heart. I did a lot of this in my pursuit of God, and one night I prayed to God to send Jesus back to earth. And I said, if you're not going to send him back, now let me help carry his cross. And a short time after that, I was taken to meet with Jesus. The first plane we went to was the plane where we go when we are without embodiment. And there I saw that nothing that we own or possess upon earth has any effect in the world that we live in when we are not living in embodiment. After watching all of the desires and possessions stripped, per se, from human beings, I was then taken to meet with Jesus in a plane that is much beyond where we dwell when we are not in embodiment. And I was taken to this room, and it overlooked all of the heavens. And it had no windows in it, just open spaces where I could look upon the stars. Within a very short time, Jesus came bounding up the steps. And I can remember the awe that I experienced, the inability to speak. Finally, after a time, I asked him the one question which was closest to my heart. And I've often asked my students, if you met Jesus for the first time, what is that one question you would ask him? My question was, is your Father coming? Jesus smiled at me, and there was great mirth in his eyes. And he said, my Father will come later. So finally, in June 6, 1971, after a tremendous amount of what we classify as mystical experiences, I, at last, came face to face with God. It took a period of about 3 days. I had just put my husband on board an airplane. I then returned home, and shortly after I returned home, I felt a presence in the room unlike any presence that I had ever experienced. It stayed for a half hour, went away. The next day at precisely 10:30, this great presence came again. After a half hour, he left. On the third and final day, as I put the music on of the great Scheherazade, at 10:30, once again, this great presence came. And as I glanced out toward the sky, I felt clamps come on my head, and suddenly my mind fused with the mind of God. And the mind of God is the light of God, and the light of God is 150 billion galaxies. It is so hard to comprehend for most of us that God is so vast. And yet, even if we went to the far reaches of the universe, to the outside fringes of our known universe, God even exists beyond that. Because in the very beginning of time, God created out of himself light. This is rather hard to define, because you see, God is consciousness. He isn't really mind as we come to think of him. But he created within himself a great light, and in this light was the prototype, the engineering plan of a universe. This was called light of consciousness, and we know it today as his Son, or that part of God that dwells in each and every one of us, and that each and every one of us holds a seed, a part of that great plan that existed in the beginning of time. Therefore, God created no one unequal, that every individual in the world will have their moment of greatness upon the winds of time. How will this happen? We're going to learn that in the process of this course. Because we might say, oh, I am 80 years old, or I'm 60 years old, and there isn't time for me to become great, such as Cousteau and Einstein and Leonardo da Vinci and Beethoven. But you will. And I will carefully explain this as we proceed on this course. So after we have studied creation, and we take a look at ourselves, and we come to understand the potential powers in us, because we all have the power to heal, the power to discern, and the power to prophesy, along with wisdom and knowledge and a multitude of other great capabilities and talents that lie within each of us. And once we have then taken a look at that, we will fully understand the transformation of human to divine, known in the Christian world as the resurrection of the dead. It is so sad when we think of resurrection as being something in which Gabriel's going to blow his horn, and the graves are going to open up, and skeletons are going to come out of the graves and stand in some horrible line for judgment. No, our God is a God that contains all of us within him, and we are in him, and he is in us. We have a part of him that no one else can take away from us. And for this reason alone, that is our seed of greatness. So after we have looked at the utilization of the powers, and then we go on to learn how to refine the body into a finer vibrational frequency so that we can retard aging and pain and some of the illnesses that we undergo. And then we go on to learn how to refine the body into a finer vibrational frequency so that we can retard aging and pain and some of the illnesses that we undergo. And then we'll at last take that final and last journey home. So as we begin now our entry into the universe of the stars, I'm going to go to the chalkboard, and we're going to do some drawing that will help us to understand. We'll take down the universe, or our own solar system as we understand it. Let us go to the chalkboard here for a moment. And I draw a straight line here, and I'm going to put an M, and this represents mass consciousness. Mass consciousness is 6 billion people. And do you realize that less than 1% know and understand who they are, where they're going, and why we're a part of the human race? Less than 1% of 6 billion people. As mass consciousness, we're not bad, but we're not all good. And we represent those that go to work every day, maybe go to church on Sunday, whatever our religion may be, and we come home in the evening with our work finished, and we curl up watching television or playing our favorite games or something like that. This is mass consciousness, kind of doing the same thing virtually every day of their life. I'm going to put then now a gateway. There's a doorway here where there are some that step out of mass consciousness. We know those as devotees, and we're going to find them in every religion and every philosophy and in every science of the world. And devotee is, of course, really an Eastern term, a term used that represents one devoted to someone or something. I've traveled the world over, and one thing I have found out is that everyone believes that their master is the one and only way, regardless of what path we're following, whether it is, again, philosophy or science or religion. And because we believe that our idealism or our master is the only one, we are devoted to that cause. We often, through this, close the doorway to broader and wider knowledge. But nonetheless, devotee is a step away or up from mass consciousness because it's doing something that is different, following a higher ideal than what it did back here in the mass consciousness. Then we come to this great gateway that we have seen on other courses, the gateway where many are called and few are chosen, and this is called probation. And probation means that this is a position where we have indicated we are not satisfied with the answers of life. We want to know why we're human, where we're going as a human race, and why God seemed to have created one person better than another one. Why is it I couldn't play the piano at the age of 12 years old or 6 years old, and why could someone else? Why was I poor and others rich? And by the way, I really was born in poverty, and I'm very glad because it made it possible for me to do what I've been able to do in my lifetime. So this area here in probation, there are 2 steps that are outside. And these 2 steps designate kind of a fight between human and divine. Before we're allowed to enter that narrow gate where many are called and few are chosen, God has to know that it is in our hearts. We have to be ready for that path, because God takes nothing away from us that we are not ready to give up. He asks nothing of us that we are not willing to do. So when you hear the terms renunciation or impersonal life, people who walk the path of renunciation, that is what is in their heart. I walk a path of renunciation. That is a path that is in my heart, because I have chosen Jesus as an ideal. And Jesus, of course, walked with his disciples, but also very much alone. And he became the example by which I try to guide my own life. But probation is kind of a personal versus impersonal. And that sounds very cold and sterile. But impersonal means the ability to love everyone. Imagine how much freedom we would have if we could love everyone the same, love our brothers and our sisters and our friends and those that we are married to. If we could love everyone, then would we not be happy everywhere? Yet we expect others everywhere we go to love us. But are we willing to love everyone else? As we walk this pathway of the immortal, the pathway of the resurrection, one thing we're going to have to understand and learn and develop is the capability and ability to love everyone in the world. No, we may not love them exactly the same. We're going to love our brother and sister a bit different than we will love a friend. But we should not love them less, because God loves all of us. He loves all of us as his children, so he loves all of us the same, regardless of what we've done in life. And that may bother us, because we may think that if we try to live a good life, God is going to love us more. But that is not true. God loves all of his children, and he has the deepest compassion for those who have harsh lessons to learn because they have erred along the path that he has woven for them. So here is a kind of a personal versus an impersonal. Can we place God first above anyone, anything, love him more than anything or anyone in the world? That sounds difficult, but as we walk this path, we will learn the art of meditation. And in learning this art of meditation, this will help us to develop that kind of devotion and love that will take us to him. And here I'm going to stop for a moment, because God has been many things to many people. For instance, to many he is omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent, everywhere, every place. To other people, he is a deity that sits up in the sky. He is the father of Jesus, who walked upon the earth, and the father of other great masters who have overcome the lesser nature of themselves. So here he is, God. And yet the secret lies in both the personal and the impersonal. He who brings, or I won't say brings, but he who dwells high in the consciousness in all things is not aware when a tornado is hitting or when a tidal wave is coming. Yet if we pray, or if we talk to him or commune with him, that part of him that has been given just to us enables us then to communicate with the whole of himself, the omnipotent and omnipresent. Through us, as we watch the hurricane or the tornado, through us he learns that there is a tornado and a hurricane, and he helps us to have the strength to endure whatever may happen or whatever reprisal may come from this. So he is not the cause of these things. These are caused by atmospheric conditions, by the rotation of our planet on its orbit, and things like that. But nonetheless, our planet is a cell in the body of God. Therefore, when we turn to him, he hears us. And that power that can work through one individual can calm the seas and still the lions and the tigers, and bring happiness not only to themselves but to all mankind. As we get through this probational gate, we are then caught with the descent of the Spirit to live in the flesh. And this may sound strange to you if you have not heard it before, but since he dwells with us, he is ever there, involved in the soul. It's kind of like when we're born, he is that light that manifests through our physical consciousness. And then now through meditation and study and devotion, we actually raise him from the dead. We resurrect him. We raise him, and that puts him back into oneness with the whole of himself, with the entire universe and beyond. And then he can take possession of us. And in doing so, he can cause us to purify what is called our lesser nature. Because this is not something we're going to do by ourselves. Someone tells us we're not doing something right, we immediately are terribly offended and we get angry and hostile. And yet perhaps that is not a criticism. Perhaps someone is trying to help us when they tell us what we aren't doing correctly or doing right. And as time passes and we go through this transformational change, we take criticism and critiquing much more easily than we do in the beginning of time. But with the descent of his descent, we are compelled to purify. We can't run away from him. We can't call him names. We can call him names, but that's not very wise, because he dwells with us. And he can create the circumstances necessary for us to learn all of the unlearned lessons. So that is the God, the personal God. And we must learn to relate to that personal God in order to relate to the omnipotent and omnipresent. I am caught for a moment with something that's taught in the Holy Gita. And that Holy Gita, it's stated, Arjuna asked Krishna, who is the Christ consciousness in India. In other words, Krishna consciousness and Christ consciousness is the light consciousness in each of us. But they call him Krishna in India. And Arjuna says to ask Krishna, which is, shall I meditate upon you or shall I meditate upon the Brahman? And Krishna says, meditate upon me, because it is so difficult to meditate upon the whole, and I shall become to you, O Partha, the Savior. So this is what we have done as we've passed through devotee or devotional state. We have meditated upon a master. Then as we step into probation, we then start to become as the master was. The descent of the Spirit enables us to do this, and with this he brings to us our seat of greatness, because we do not have any powers of ourselves. This is the power that lives in us, the power that flows through us. And with proper utilization and understanding, we have that connection with the universe of the stars. And we have power that is beyond our greatest imagination. If a grain of wheat can raise the earth as it grows toward the light, then how much more powerful must we be as a human being, as we too grow toward the light. So now I'm going to introduce you to yourself, a little bit about what constitutes your lesser nature. And we have obviously a new board here, and it's going to take a little seasoning. We have a lower and a higher nature. Our lower nature is comprised of the physical body. We are comprised of a feeling body, if we want to call it, or a layer of feelings, a part of us that is very sensitive, not only to the feeling of others, but to the feeling of pain and suffering. It is our awareness through the feeling body that makes it possible for us to know when we're not bleeding to death. In other words, if we had no feeling body and we were cut or injured seriously, we wouldn't feel it or know it. So our feeling body is given to us for protection. And then we have what is known as the emotional body. Through love and hate, through anger and jealousy, through non-anger and non-jealousy, compassion, understanding, all these are a part of what constitutes our emotional body, and we learn from them. For instance, we learn that love can overcome hatred. We learn that we can overcome jealousy if we can understand the basic rule of life. Do you know that every one of the 7 deadly sins, such as gluttony and anger and jealousy and hatred, emanate from protection, what is called the basic need of self-survival? That is called the primordial law of the universe. When we experience animals, they operate from their instinctive nature. We operate from a self nature, I, me, and we have done whatever is necessary to protect ourselves in whatever way for millions of years. In other words, we're jealous because someone has infringed upon our territory. Maybe we have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, a husband or a wife, and someone comes along and it's like that person is taking this from us. And that is only one step up from the instinctive nature of a herd. In other words, 2 males will fight over the females of the herd for supremacy. And that is a part of the instinctive nature of self-survival. And if we can understand that, we can trace back any one of all of the 7 deadly passions. Our emotions help us to overcome. If we experience hatred, then we can work with the mind to develop love where hatred existed. And by this, the soul then is purified and grows more and more toward its unity with God. And all this is contained in what is within the parameters of what is considered our lesser self. This has had many wild names as time has passed, like Antichrist, meaning going anti to the way of the Spirit which created us. It's called the devil, meaning anything that destroys life. If you take devil and you reverse the words, it comes out lived. So anything that destroys our ability to live is then called devil. We come to think of devil as being a deity or a force. Back in medieval Christianity, of course, it was more of a deity, and as we have approached modern time, we have been more prone to give this wily old creature the name Satan, or a power. And this power that, of course, Satan comes from the word natus, or natal and birth, anything, again, that destroys life. So Antichrist, Satan, devil, whatever we want to call it, or just simply our lower nature, this is the culprit that gets us into all of our trouble. This is the part that hates and has anger and jealousy. And it is because we experience this that we will strive diligently to purify it. Because beyond the parameters of this is our soul. Many people, I believe, feel that the soul is in the body, but the body is actually in the soul. And the soul extends around the body and contains in it layer after layer after layer after layer of past memories. We have within the deep storehouse of the subconscious mind the memory patterns that have existed since the very beginning of time. So you can imagine what it might be like to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist in tomorrow's world. Not in today's world. I greatly fear we are in our infancy. We haven't even developed discernment where we can look back into the deep inroads of the soul in order to know what makes it sick. But what we do know, and what we have called the subconscious, are those experiences that have happened from childhood. However, back in the soul, we have all the experiences from the beginning of time. No, we don't remember them. We don't remember the forming of light, or being light and a part and one with everything. We don't remember our passage into the creation of our solar system and even our own planet. We don't remember those things, but they're there, all those experiences. And one day, when psychiatry and psychology have all passed through this wondrous transformational change and possess that great consciousness of God called cosmic consciousness or God consciousness, then they will also see deep into the inroads of the soul. For instance, it would be pretty hard for us to really be terribly skillful with one of the greatest powers that we have, and that is the power to heal. We've always thought in terms of the laying of the hands and praying and allowing the spirit of someone else, Jesus or whoever, to flow through us to do the healing upon an individual. And yet we have the power of the universe. And if we can develop the constancy of the mind sufficiently that this mind is stilled, and that in its stillness it becomes one with everything. In great healing, where the miracles take place, you should have little or no awareness of existence. You should be nothing more than the pulse of the universe flowing through the person that you are healing. Now, discernment, if we had developed that capability, we would know where that healing was needed, because it is not much value to heal the body if we haven't healed the mind. You see, many illnesses began with the mind, of what we think. For instance, I picked up a little girl, she was about 12 years old, traveling from, I think it was from Olympia or someplace in there. And she was coming to Seattle, if I remember correctly. I picked her up because I knew she was safe with me, and I was afraid someone would pick her up that she wouldn't be safe with. And as we're riding along, I'm saying nothing, she is saying nothing. And finally I said, "Oh, so you are planning on taking your life? That is rather stupid." And she looked at me in such shock that I would know, or that she was planning on taking her life. In that she was only 11 or 12, she probably would not have had the courage, or the kind of courage it takes to take one's life. But often where there is smoke, there is fire. And here was a person so despondent that what would a physical healing have done for her? I had many miles to discuss with her the importance of living and why it is important to live. And by the time we got to our destination, she had decided that she certainly would live her life to the best that she could. And so she was healed, but because of healing the emotions, through healing the mind and understanding the problem. Some people cannot be healed. We can heal for hours upon end. We can be very powerful in this work. But sometimes people have lessons to learn that can only be learned through illness. I think of terms of one of my friends. When he got cancer, someone, of course people, rather not someone, but people expected that I would heal him. And I went to him and I said, "People think that I will heal you." And I said, "I will not heal you, because there are many lessons that you must learn. And if I really care for you, and I do, and you are truly my friend, or I'm truly your friend, I would not deny you the right to learn those lessons which might change your life. I patiently sent him what I call a chemotherapy card, so that every time he had a chemotherapy treatment, there would be a card waiting for him, something to cheer him up, something to know that someone cared. But I would not heal him. And he said to me at the end of his chemotherapy, he said, you know, I watch these children come in and go through these treatments so patiently and so beautifully. And it makes me ashamed of myself that I should be the way that I am. By the way, this person is still well to this day. The cancer went into remission and has remained that way because he has done all the many things that's necessary, rest, and he works out every day in the swimming pool, and he tries to eat right and things like this. So the cancer has remained in remission, and his life was granted a stay of execution for X number of years. So yes, we need this ability to discern in order to know what is best for that person that we're trying to heal. We also have in us the ability of prophecy, because God wrote the entire plan in the beginning of time. He created it, and if he stopped in the contemplation of this perfect plan, the universe would disintegrate. But of course, he does not. And so we're caught in this perfect and a wondrous plan that obviously the destiny was written in the beginning. It has always existed. Then as we unravel these inroads of ourselves, how is it we're not going to know what the future will bring us? I look at knowing the future as an integral part of having a better and more quality life. For instance, I would not have purchased a car that I once purchased that didn't run long enough to get me home. We wouldn't get involved in land deals that weren't going to be profitable. There are many things. We wouldn't cross the road and get hit by an automobile. How many times I have seen the tremendous power of God protect those that he loves. I remember one time driving down the freeway, and suddenly a car crashed in front of me. It had been on the right, and it suddenly swerved and hit the kind of the center concrete. I saw with eyes the stretching out of time. It was as though two hands had a hold of time and stretching it out, slowing it down. And by the time I got to that car, the man was out of the car, bleeding, running down the roadway. I just went out around the automobile and kept on going, and in a very short distance I found a police officer and was able to direct him to the scene of the accident. But I saw this power. I can remember also sliding at 20, 25 miles an hour on a slippery road into steel pillars, but I never hit them. Some force, some power stopped it just an inch or so away from the steel pillars themselves. Oh, how much wonder there is in this path of God, in the great and wonderful, beautiful experiences that will happen to us as we court him and he courts us, and we put him there ahead of all things in our life. We'll be talking about some of the experiences that I underwent, and it is not that I am here to talk about myself, but to show you that what has happened to me will happen to each and every one of you out there, given time and circumstance. So now that we know what material we're going to cover and we've taken a look at ourselves, then we're now going to begin with the beginning of creation. As we mentioned, Neil Armstrong made that statement, you must understand the nature of the universe in order to understand your destiny. So it is impossible for us to contemplate or meditate or think about 150 billion galaxies. But it is not impossible for us to think about our own solar system. And that's where we're going to begin, because since God has but one plan, and that plan has existed long before creation began, then that means that the laws of nature are immutable and unchanging. That however our planet was formed is exactly how every planet in the vast universe of the stars was formed. As our sun, S-U-N, came into birth, so did every sun in our vast universe come into existence. It is called by science as kind of the explosion, an explosion that came forth in the beginning of time, the Big Bang Theory, if we want to use scientific terms. The Big Bang Theory did not bring forth in totality the universe of the stars, because the reflection of light upon the planets give them also an illusion of a star, although in reality only suns are actually stars. Now, if we were to be on a planet that was further away than our Earth would of course appear as if it were surrounded by light, and that light would make it appear as a star. So the Big Bang Theory brought forth the suns of the universe, but not as simple as it may seem. Whenever anything happens in the universe, it is like everything gives birth, reaches a plateau, gives birth again. So many, many, many come simultaneously. Thus this plan of God, the light, flowed within his being for however many billions and billions of years that I do not know. I could not give you a date or a time of such a phenomena, but I only know that gradually it was created and built, and as it was, the plan of the universe was beginning to unfold, not in solid state yet, but as it will be in the end of time. That is why we can be so certain that everyone will reach perfection, that our planet has an important role in our own solar system, and that our own solar system has an important role in the universe of the stars. We can be very certain of this because we all existed in the beginning of time. So as we think in terms of the suns coming forth in our universe, we would do better, I believe, if we stay within the parameters of our own solar system and study our own sun, because as our sun gives birth to planets, so does every sun give birth to planets in every known solar system, in every known galaxy. There's a great story about Socrates. One day Socrates was out walking, and it was at sunrise, and he became very fascinated with the sun. So he stood there in contemplation, and he stood during the day. And that night his disciples came and gathered around him to see if he would continue his contemplation through the night. He did. Then the next morning he did a very strange thing. He was seen to bow to the sun, salute it, and walk away. What could Socrates have discovered as he watched that 24 hours between sunrise and sunrise? It is probable that he discovered the nature of the universe, that somewhere through those hours he entered that sacred state of cosmic consciousness, fusion with the topic or subject of meditation. To explain that, we have to say that whatever you focus on, what causes your mind to unite with it. So therefore, whatever you concentrate on must reveal itself to you. If you are thinking only of God, God must reveal himself to you. If you are thinking and contemplating upon the sun, then the sun must reveal its nature to you. And so it will, because it contains within it the engineering plan and prototype for its own particular solar system. So we know that Socrates must have discovered something very special in the sun, that he would acknowledge it the subsequent day and bow to it and salute it. I promise you that before we're through, I'm not sure that you will believe it, but you will find out what Socrates discovered. And I believe, for those that can believe and can see the logic and comprehension to this, that they too will go out and bow to the sun and salute it. When I merged into cosmic consciousness on that day in 1971, I was shown God's divine plan. This made my life so much simpler, because it's like downloading a large computer into a small computer. And as it does so, of course, the small computer becomes a reflection of the large computer. And they're never separated from that download, unless the large computer or someone, the small computer, the plug is pulled between them. I have been fortunate through 30 years of walking with God that separation has never been. So therefore, that great computer in the sky, the consciousness of God, has always been available to me and has taught me in all the things that I have learned, philosophy and science and religion and healing and prophecy, in all of the arts. So will he do this for you one day. I have given my life to all of you to teach you the way to link with the consciousness of God, that we can bring forth this magnificent cosmic consciousness upon earth, because you see, it is the consciousness of our future world, and shall be possessed in time by every man, woman, and child. And imagine what this world will be like when there is no longer any hatred, when jealousy and anger have dissipated, and when we work together as a world family. And then, and only then, will there ever be an end of the world. Because I promise you, there shall be no end until we have completed the task that has been given to us. And God created and brought forth this earth for us to tame. And in taming, we would learn the lessons that would mature us from the infant child into a mature spiritual human being. And we're not talking about a religious being, but a spiritual being, because a spiritual being will become more and more the reflection of God, encompassing and endorsing all religions and all science and faith, traveling with an open mind under the guidance of the great light of the universe. Yes, that's going to be your seat of greatness one day. And we want to bring peace to earth. I want one day that every human being should have all that has been given to me and oh so much more. I think of Jesus' words when he said, these things I do, ye shall do, and greater. So as we start with our topic next week, hoping that you will join us, we will begin with the sun of our universe. We will find that it is not solid light as we have perceived it to be, but minute, millions and billions of minute particles that kind of create their own light and suffuse together to give to us daylight. And that every single particle of light is an integral part of not only our universe, but a part of our sun. And that our sun gives birth and has given birth to our planets as a mother gives birth to a child. And as we watch ourselves progress from the very interior near the sun to where we produce third-dimensional life, we will believe and know that tomorrow we'll be much more than we are today. Join me next week.